Welcome to Halfway Dark.
The Grinners. The blackout hit just past 2 in the morning. 1 second, the street was quiet, the hum of air conditioners and distant traffic filling the night. The next, every light died at once. My apartment sank into pitch darkness, and with it, a stillness that pressed against my skin. I froze, listening. There was a soft scraping, deliberate, as if metal dragged slowly across stone. At first, I told myself it was a branch scratching the window, but the street had no trees, not near my building. The sound came again, closer this time, patient, almost curious. I reached for my phone. Dead. The screen refused to light, leaving me in total black. That's when I heard it, the faintest of laughs, high and hollow, almost like a child practicing laughter for the first time. It wasn't playful. It was wrong. When I leaned toward the window, I saw them. 5 figures across the street, shoulder to shoulder, frozen in place. Their heads tilted slightly too far to the side. They wore stretched rubber masks, pale and glossy, each with a painted smile too wide to be natural. No real faces existed beneath. I stepped back. The lights flickered, and when they returned, the street was empty. I thought I had imagined it. But when I checked the ground, muddy footprints led toward my front door, stopping at the threshold as if waiting. The next night, the blackout came again. This time, it lasted 4 minutes. I stayed up, curtains open, waiting for the moment. When the lights returned, the mailbox was gone. The welcome mat, gone. A small decorative gnome I'd had for years, gone. The absence of ordinary things unsettled me more than their presence. I installed cameras in the backyard and at the driveway. I watched obsessively, hoping for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The third blackout, I caught them. Dozens of figures, standing shoulder to shoulder in the yard, their masks gleaming in the night vision feed. Each one's painted smile caught the infrared light. Everyone identical. They didn't move at first. They only stared at the house. And then, in perfect unison, they raised their hands and waved. Not a friendly wave in acknowledgement. They had seen me. They were aware. I froze. My own reflection in the monitor made me flinch. Then they were gone. No one saw them leave, yet footprints crisscrossed the yard and ended inside my apartment, facing my bedroom. Every print perfectly spaced, like a marching order. I tried to tell someone, anyone. The police smiled politely and left, saying it was probably pranksters or kids from the new development. I wanted to argue, to insist they'd seen the masks, the unnatural smiles, the way no one's face ever moved beneath them, but the words stuck in my throat. By the weekend, the neighborhood was different. Houses dark at odd hours, dogs missing, mail piling up. Entire streets seemed hollow, as if the Grinners had passed through and left the air heavier. The following night, I stayed awake until the blackout came again. It lasted 5 minutes this time. I could hear movement outside, slow, deliberate steps scraping across gravel, synchronized like a metronome. Then came the laughter, layered, echoing, impossible to pinpoint. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. Through the window, I saw them. Dozens, standing across the street, heads tilted, painted smiles shining like oil in the moonlight. Their bodies rigid, their presence almost ceremonial. Then, closer. I could hear their soft steps on my porch, on the balcony outside. They were inside. I hadn't seen them arrive. I couldn't see their faces, only the grins, stretching too wide, rubbery, grotesquely cheerful. The closet door creaked. I shined the flashlight toward it. Nothing, except the wall now marked with dozens of small handprints, oily and pale, all forming the same painted smile. My own reflection caught in a mirror beside it, and I realized my teeth were clenched. I was mimicking them. I sat trembling in the living room until sunrise. curtains drawn, lights flickering weakly. I could still hear soft footsteps above and below, even after the city woke. Every morning, I found small things gone. A kitchen knife, a notebook, a set of keys. They didn't steal valuables. They collected presents. They collected attention. I drove during the day. Every street I passed had the same signs. Darkness that came too fast. Footprints where none should exist. Curtains twitching as if watching. The Grinners had already inspected these houses. They moved silently, perfectly synchronized, leaving nothing human behind except the faintest reminder they had been there. At night, I tried to sleep. I failed. The blackout came again. 6 minutes. I heard the scraping across the floors, the faint rustle of rubber against wood. Their laughter swelled into a chorus, overlapping, impossibly rhythmic. I held my breath as one of them appeared in the corner of the room. The mask glimmered in the flashlight's thin beam. Painted teeth, perfect and cruel, stretched unnaturally wide. I whispered a prayer for luck, for a window to break, for anything. The figure tilted its head, just like the others outside. Its smile didn't change. My pulse hammered in my ears. The power returned. The figure was gone, but the handprint remained on the floor, muddy, smudged, facing my bed. They had been here, watching, waiting. Days passed. I moved into a cheap motel, thinking distance would help, but the blackout came there too. Every night, for 3 minutes, the lights would die. And always, when they returned, the painted smiles appeared somewhere on a mirror, a wall, a TV screen, always facing me. I began carrying a flashlight everywhere. I slept with the television on. I even sat at the window, curtains open, trying to see them before they saw me. But the moment I looked too long, they vanished. The awareness lingered. I wasn't alone. One night, I whispered into the darkness, "Please, leave me alone." The reply came in soft chorus, "We saw you." They don't speak words, not really. But the masks convey intent. They notice everything, and the painted smiles convey that they are pleased. I learned not to resist. I learned not to stare. The only rule is not to give them attention beyond what is necessary to survive. Sometimes, when the power flickers for a second, I see dozens of teeth behind curtains, behind glass, just for a moment. Then gone. My heart stops every time. If your power goes out tonight, don't look out the window. Don't move. Don't breathe. They love attention. And if you want to survive the nights to come, open the horror box and subscribe before they find you. The Mirror Burglars. The first time it happened, I thought it was a trick of the light. A flicker, a shift in the hallway mirror, a shape that wasn't quite mine. I told myself I was tired. The apartment had been quiet for hours, yet when I glanced at the mirror, my reflection hesitated for a heartbeat, then continued like nothing had happened. I ignored it, went to bed, tried to convince myself that shadows can play games when the lights fail. But the next morning, things were different. The small side table near the mirror was rotated, a photograph of my parents missing from the frame. I chalked it up to forgetfulness, moving things while cleaning, though I knew I hadn't touched them. The following night, the power cut out. Just a short flicker at first, then a total blackout. My apartment plunged into darkness, and for a moment, silence pressed down on everything. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tap against glass. Not loud enough to wake neighbors, but distinct, as if fingers were rapping lightly, patiently, waiting for me to notice. I froze, my eyes adjusted. I saw movement in the mirror, subtle at first as shimmer across the glass, like condensation shifting in a draft. A shape stepped backward, impossibly graceful, and then it appeared. A figure emerging from the reflection itself. Its face blurred, like fogged glass, features smeared beyond recognition. But its eyes silver, reflective like mercury, glimmered in the faint light of the hallway. I couldn't breathe. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. It moved carefully, backward, stepping out into my apartment as if leaving a stage. Behind it, the mirror rippled unnaturally, bending space in a way that made my stomach churn. When it left, I was shaking. The room felt altered. A chair was angled incorrectly, a rug slightly shifted, a book missing from the shelf. Nothing of value had been stolen, but the familiar arrangement of my home felt violated, as if someone had quietly rehearsed the space for themselves. Word began to spread. Other neighbors reported similar experiences: objects subtly rearranged, pets vanished, photos missing. No forced entry. No signs that anyone had walked through the door. Only mirrors, all warped and silent witnesses to their arrival. One man told me the story that chilled me to the bone. He had woken to find the burglars in his hallway mirror, dragging his reflection backward into the glass. He swore he had screamed, but no sound escaped. Now, whenever he looked at himself, the reflection lagged behind, a second too slow, as if part of him remained trapped in another dimension. I tried to photograph the figure. I set up cameras in every room with a mirror. Nothing. Not a single frame captured movement. Only static, and in rare instances, the briefest glint of silver eyes in the reflection fleeting, impossible to focus on, like they existed just at the edge of perception. Then it happened to me again. My bathroom mirror fogged up, though the air was dry. I didn't wipe it. The shape moved behind the condensation, stepping backward from its own reflection. My pulse hammered as it crossed the threshold of the glass. The silver eyes caught my own, and for a heartbeat, I felt the tug of awareness, like my reflection was no longer entirely mine. I tried to warn myself. Don't stare too long. Don't interact. Don't give attention. But the curiosity burned. I couldn't stop watching as it moved, carefully, systematically, arranging my apartment as it went, not taking, only shifting. Each motion deliberate, precise, inhumanly graceful. The blackout returned almost nightly, each time longer, each time more invasive. The burglars were patient, waiting for the moments when the world's eyes closed. During the day, the apartment looked normal. At night, I would see the subtle differences. A rug slightly off-center, a chair rotated, the faint impression of footprints on the carpet, leading to mirrors I hadn't looked into in months. Neighbors whispered about the eyes. One woman claimed she had caught them on camera, her flash reflecting silver eyes looking directly at her, shining like molten metal. She said that when she played the footage back, the eyes were gone, leaving only the normal reflection of her living room. I began to notice small things about my own reflection. It hesitated in movements, as if uncertain. I raised my hand. The mirrored version lifted slightly slower, a lag too precise to be coincidental. Every reflection in my apartment became a potential portal, a doorway where something could step backward out into my life. I tried removing mirrors. Every reflective surface, glass tabletop, framed photo, anything with the slightest sheen. Still, the disturbances continued. The faint tapping, the silver glint behind surfaces, the sense of being watched when I was utterly alone. It was impossible to escape. One night, I woke to a subtle noise. A knock, soft, deliberate, behind the bathroom mirror. My pulse raced. I dared not approach. The mirror surface shimmered slightly, and for a split second, my own reflection hesitated, a subtle delay that made my stomach turn. The sound seemed to mimic my breathing, tapping along with my own pulse. I whispered into the dark, "Leave me alone." The tapping paused. Then the faintest movement in the mirror, a ripple like disturbed water, stepped backward. I didn't look again. I didn't move. I waited until morning, and when the sun returned, nothing was visible. But the sense of presence remained, heavy in the room, insistent. I began sleeping with all lights on, covering mirrors when I could, but even in daylight, I felt it. My reflection hesitated, a second too late in a doorway or window. Every reflective surface became a trap, a potential gateway for them to return. The burglars weren't after money or items. They were after observation, attention, the connection that came from stepping out of one world into another. The strange occurrences escalated. Photos were missing. Family heirlooms shifted slightly. Pets would vanish and reappear in odd places, always intact, but positioned incorrectly, as if placed for a stage. The apartment became a theater, and I the unwitting audience, forced to watch an unending rehearsal of rearrangement. Then the fog returned. Mirrors steamed up for no reason. The shape emerged again, stepping backward from its own reflection. Silver eyes caught mine. I could feel my heartbeat being measured, timed, every blink, every motion, noted. A subtle tug, a pull I could not resist. I didn't touch, didn't speak, didn't breathe more than necessary. When the figure disappeared, the apartment felt empty, but the echoes remained. The floorboards whispered under invisible weight. Shadows moved against walls where no one stood. The world had shifted, made slightly wrong. I learned the rules. Never wipe the fog. Never stare too long. Always respect the space they occupy, and never, ever give them attention beyond what is necessary. And if you see your reflection hesitate, a second too slow, do not approach. Don't move. Don't breathe. If you like stories that stare back, open the horror box, but don't break the glass. And if you want to survive the nights, subscribe before what's behind the mirror notices you. The last blackout came 2 nights ago. I sat awake, watching the hallway mirror. It shimmered. The tapping began. I froze. The shape stepped backward, emerging again with silver eyes reflecting mine. Then the lights returned. Nothing remained but the tension, the emptiness, and the unshakable knowledge that my own reflection was no longer entirely my own. The intruders who only entered through shadows. I first noticed them in the corner of my apartment, just beyond the reach of my lamp. A shadow stretched, elongated unnaturally, then disappeared the moment I blinked. I told myself it was fatigue, but the unease lingered. The next night, I saw it again. This time, it moved with intention, slow, deliberate, mimicking the angle of my own body as I reached for a glass of water. I froze, unsure if I was dreaming or awake. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Shadows shift. The mind plays tricks, right? But when I leaned in closer, the corner was empty, yet a faint outline remained, as if the darkness itself had been pressed into a shape. At work, things grew stranger. The office lights flickered, and down the hall, shadows stretched across the walls in impossible ways. They mirrored my movements for a moment before dissolving into nothing. No one else seemed to notice. Objects in my apartment started moving subtly. The chair by my desk shifted forward a few inches. The blinds in my window tilted slightly. At first, I blamed a breeze or my own absent-mindedness. But it happened even with all windows closed. I set up a camera, hoping to catch some explanation. The footage showed black, shifting forms moving across rooms without opening doors. They didn't interact with objects, but they existed, present and deliberate, watching and learning. Mirrors became terrifying. Look directly at one, and it reflected only my room. Glance at the corner of my eye, and a dark silhouette stretched there, perfectly matching my posture. I began avoiding reflective surfaces, but they found ways to appear anyway. At night, I woke to shadows on my walls that didn't belong. One stretched across the bedroom floor, then slowly rose like a dark puppeteer. I held my breath as it mimicked my own movements, even lifting a hand when I raised mine. I asked friends if they ever felt watched, if they'd noticed anything strange. They laughed, called me paranoid. But one morning, a friend called to say she saw someone or something moving like me on the street outside my apartment. My blood ran cold. I tried locking myself in my bedroom. I tried turning on every light. Still, shadows stretched across doorways, creeping along the walls, tracing my movements. Every corner of my apartment felt alive with unseen eyes, observing, imitating. One evening, I thought I was clever. I changed my routine entirely different route home. New habits, altered posture, unusual gestures. Nothing worked. They adapted instantly, appearing in shadows I hadn't yet passed, mimicking perfectly. Even in the dark, I felt them. A presence that mirrored my breathing, matched my pacing, always just outside vision. It was impossible to relax, impossible to escape. Each night, the shadows learned, becoming more exact, more confident. I tried to confront them. I stood in the living room, glaring into a corner, demanding they reveal themselves. The darkness shifted, elongated, and then rose a humanoid shape, faceless, yet eerily familiar. It mimicked my stance perfectly, every subtle movement. I spoke aloud, asking questions. No answer, only mimicry. I moved, it moved. I jumped, it jumped. I ran. It mirrored every step across the apartment, across walls, across hallways, as though gravity itself bent for them. I recorded everything on video. When I played it back, I realized it wasn't just one form. It was multiples, overlapping shadows moving in unison. They were everywhere, yet nowhere, learning, practicing, waiting. My reflections betrayed me. Mirrors, glass, polished surfaces, each became a portal for these intruders. I couldn't look anywhere without seeing a shadow moving exactly like me, or slightly out of sync, a cruel parody of my own life. I stopped sleeping. Even when my eyes were closed, I could see them in the corners of my mind, mimicking, copying. Each movement, each gesture, each thought somehow tracked by faceless observers who only existed in darkness. One night, I awoke to my bedroom door slowly opening. No sound, no creak, just a shadow slipped inside, rising from the floor like smoke solidifying into a figure. It copied every motion I made, even my shallow, fearful breathing. I tried to leave the apartment, running through hallways and downstairs. Shadows blocked paths, stretched across walls, reflected in every window, appearing at impossible angles. No matter where I went, they were there, patient, perfect, silent. I called the police once. Nothing. The shadows didn't break doors or windows. They weren't real in a conventional sense. They didn't enter through walls, ceilings, or floors. They emerged from shadows themselves, obeying rules I couldn't understand. I began leaving small notes for myself. They follow. Do not sleep. Check corners. In the morning, the notes were rearranged, sometimes rewritten, but undeniably in my handwriting. I wasn't alone, and they were mocking me. I recorded audio to catch them. Only silence. But at night, when I replayed it, I heard subtle rustling, almost like breathing, synchronized with my own movements. They existed in a space just outside perception, perfectly coordinated with me. Every night, the walls seemed to shift. Shadows stretched impossibly long, angles bending unnaturally. I could feel them observing me even when I was awake, even when I thought I was moving freely. The breaking point came when I looked in a dark window across the street. A figure waved back. I hadn't waved. Its movement mirrored me perfectly, but in reverse, as though it had studied me from the inside. I screamed. The shadows multiplied, filling the apartment, merging, stretching, dancing with my every move. My reflection no longer belonged to me, it belonged to them. Faceless, infinite, unstoppable. If you think you're safe in the dark, open the horror box and subscribe. They may already be in your shadows. I turned off the lights. The apartment went black, but the shadows lingered, waiting, stretching, perfectly in sync with me, and now maybe with you. Faces in the wallpaper watched me sleep. The first night in my new apartment, the wallpaper was what bothered me most. Faded green with a repeating floral pattern that peeled at the edges like old skin. It felt alive somehow, textured with memory. When I turned off the lights, the shapes shifted. My mind tried to explain it as tricks of the moonlight, but the darker it got, the clearer they seemed. Faint outlines of faces pressing beneath the surface, their mouths slightly open. I told myself I was tired. I had been moving boxes all day. But when I closed my eyes, I felt the uncanny certainty of being watched. The air itself seemed to pulse with quiet breathing. The next morning, I checked the wall in daylight. Nothing, just torn paper, old glue, faint mildew stains forming random patterns. No faces. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the room remembered me. By the second night, I noticed new details. The folds of the wallpaper had changed shape, curling in ways that formed faint, familiar expressions. I could have sworn one corner looked like it was smiling. When I leaned closer, I thought I saw eyes inside the patterned arc, glossy spots that reflected light differently than the rest of the wall. They disappeared when I blinked, like they were teasing me. At 2 a.m., I woke up cold. The wallpaper seemed to ripple slightly, like something underneath it was moving. I stared, wide-eyed, heart pounding, too afraid to move. Then a faint whisper came through. It wasn't words, just the sound of something shifting slow, deliberate, intimate. The texture bulged outward for a moment, as if a cheek pressed from the inside, then smoothed flat again. I tried to rationalize. Maybe water damage. Maybe mold swelling beneath layers of paint. But that didn't explain why, when I touched the surface, it felt warm. Over the next few days, the faces became clearer. 5 distinct forms emerged, each slightly different. One narrow and long, another round, another half smiling. I avoided the bedroom, sleeping on the couch, but the whispers followed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear faint laughter from inside the walls, soft, close, like someone trying not to wake me. When I turned on the lights, the faces looked innocent again, frozen mid-expression. I called maintenance. They scraped a section to test for mold, found nothing but dry plaster. When they left, I noticed the pattern had rearranged itself overnight, closing the gap where the repair had been made. I started filming at night. At first, nothing, just faint static, but around 3 a.m., subtle movement appeared. The wallpaper seemed to breathe, swelling gently in and out, perfectly in rhythm with my sleeping body. The night after that, a faint voice whispered from the direction of the wall, "Don't look away." It was soft, neither male nor female, and it made my skin crawl. I didn't sleep at all. During the day, I'd hear faint knocking behind the plaster, a rhythmic tapping, like fingers brushing the inside of the wall. My neighbors claimed they heard nothing. I started feeling isolated, paranoid. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. My reflection looked hollow. The wallpaper now resembled a crowd frozen in mid-scream. Every face slightly turned toward the bed. They were waiting for something. I tried sleeping with the lights on, hoping brightness would stop it. It didn't. Shadows formed deeper contours, emphasizing the shapes. The faces appeared sharper, more defined, like the light was feeding them. One night, I snapped. I grabbed a knife and began tearing the paper from the walls. Beneath the first layer was another older, darker, with faint silhouettes still visible, overlapping the new ones. I tore more. Each strip revealed another set of faces, stacked like memories of people erased over time. Some seemed mid-motion, others screaming silently, their outlines burned into the material. I found a small patch of plaster where the wallpaper had bubbled. When I punctured it, something warm dripped out, dark, viscous, and metallic. I stumbled back. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices now, laughing softly. The air turned thick. The wallpaper moved in waves, rippling like muscle under skin. The faces blinked slow, synchronized. For the first time, they were watching me, aware that I could finally see them. I ran to the living room. The faces there had spread too, faint at first, but growing clearer with each breath. Their eyes followed me, tracking every step. I couldn't escape them. They were part of the walls now. I slept in the hallway, lights on, knife nearby. When I opened my eyes, one of the wallpaper faces had stretched downward, closer to me, the mouth slightly open, as if whispering through the pattern. I recorded it again, desperate for proof. But in playback, the walls appeared smooth. The only thing visible was me staring into the camera, whispering words I didn't remember saying. The next morning, I found new shapes under my bedsheet's faint outlines, like faces pressed from beneath. My skin prickled. I moved out that afternoon, leaving the apartment empty. Weeks later, the property manager called, asking if I'd forgotten anything. He said the new tenant complained about faces in the wallpaper. He laughed, thought it was a joke. My stomach dropped. Now, sometimes, when I wake in my new place, I swear, I see faint shapes in the corner of my vision. The walls look plain, but when the light flickers just right, I see the familiar contours forming again. If your wallpaper ever moves, don't touch it. Don't stare too long. They remember faces, and if you keep watching, they start watching back. If you ever feel eyes in the dark, open the horror box and subscribe. They might already be looking at you. I sleep with the lights off now. It doesn't help. The wallpaper waits patiently, smiling faintly from every wall. The people who copy everything I do, I never believed in being followed. At least, not until it started. It began with small things: my coffee cup, slightly out of place, the chair I always leave pulled back just a little. I blamed tiredness until I noticed they weren't mistakes I made. At first, I thought it was coincidence. My coworker hummed the same tune I hummed while filing reports. Then someone else repeated my jokes, word for word, in meetings I hadn't even attended. It felt like I was living in a mirror world. I told myself I was imagining things. Humans are creatures of habit, right? But the more I watched, the more unsettling it became. Every action I took, someone or something mirrored. Even the way I typed emails seemed familiar elsewhere. I started noticing shadows that lingered too long, figures reflected in the corner of my eye. Not everyone saw them, but I did. They moved like me, sometimes seconds after I moved. Their presence was subtle, silent, almost polite, like a perverse etiquette of stalking. One morning, I arrived at work early. The office was empty. My desk was immaculate, exactly how I left it yesterday. Then I noticed it. A post-it note on my monitor, written in my own handwriting, saying only, "You're late." I dropped my bag and stared at it. Who else could have written it? I was the first one in. My pulse quickened. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a performer in a play I didn't audition for. Over the next week, the copying became more precise. My route to work, the way I sipped my coffee, even my pauses between steps, they were all mirrored. Sometimes when I looked up, a figure stood across the street, adjusting their tie, shifting in the same rhythm as me. I asked my colleagues if they noticed anything strange. Some laughed, others shrugged. No one else seemed to sense the subtle mimicry that had become my world. I wondered if I was losing touch with reality, or if reality itself had shifted. One night, I stayed late to finish a report. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I stepped out to get more coffee, and when I returned, someone had already typed half my report, word for word, in the exact style I always used. My hands shook. I started checking emails obsessively. Sent messages reappeared, slightly altered, with punctuation changed, sentences rearranged, but undeniably mine. It wasn't just copying. It was rewriting my life, rearranging my world without me noticing. At home, the same phenomenon occurred. I walked in, and everything seemed normal until I noticed it. My shoes, lined up as I always left them, had shifted ever so slightly. On my couch, a notebook lay open, my pen still inside, but the last page filled with my own handwriting. A journal entry I hadn't written yet. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw figures mimicking me, standing behind me, sitting where I sat, pausing as I paused. They weren't human. Or maybe they were. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I tried to confront them. At first, I didn't know how. I waited in the hallway after work, staring at the empty office. Then a shadow moved, exactly like me, echoing every subtle shift of my weight. I froze, but it didn't stop. It raised its hand as I did, mimicked my breathing, my posture, my hesitation. My reflection in the glass across the hall seemed alive, but wrong it smiled when I didn't. My heart pounded, but I couldn't turn away. I asked it questions. No answer. Just mimicry, patience, precision. Everything I said, it repeated a moment later, inflected slightly differently, always observing. I realized I wasn't dealing with one figure. There were more, always appearing in the periphery, copying, learning, adapting. I started to leave notes for myself, hoping to trap them. But the notes were gone in the morning. My own handwriting stared back at me in unfamiliar ways, rearranged, as if commenting on me. I felt like an actor being rehearsed by a ghost director I couldn't see. Paranoia became a constant companion. I tried to change routines, walk different paths, sit in different chairs, use my left hand instead of my right. It didn't matter. They adapted instantly. It was like living inside a live echo of my own life. One night, I woke to the sound of typing. My laptop was open, though I hadn't touched it. The screen displayed an email draft with every single word I had intended to write tomorrow. The cursor blinked, waiting. I didn't know who was typing, or if I had typed it unconsciously. I installed cameras in my apartment. At first, nothing. Then I reviewed the footage. A shadow moved through the kitchen, mirrored my every action from the previous day. No face, no identity. Just perfect mimicry, like I was living with a reflection that could move independently. I tried leaving town. My destination was hours away. I called friends and family, checked in constantly. They laughed at my paranoia, but I noticed the same movements on their streets, the same familiar gestures appearing in their routines, as if I carried these intruders with me wherever I went. I stopped trusting reflections. Mirrors became portals, windows became traps. Every surface that could hold an image seemed to pulse with life. I avoided cameras, glass, even puddles outside. Still, I felt them following, copying, learning. The breaking point came one evening when I saw myself or something exactly like me, standing across the street, looking directly at me. I ran. My heart hammered, legs screaming, but it mirrored every step, kept perfect pace, its head tilted at the same angle. I confronted it in a dark alley. "Who are you?" I shouted. My voice echoed strangely. The figure smiled, exactly like me. It raised its hand, and I raised mine. Then it spoke, or rather, it parroted, "Who are you?" I stumbled back, terrified. Everything I thought I knew about reality shattered. I wanted to run forever, but no path was safe. Every street, every office, every home seemed invaded by this perfect mimicry. I was never alone. I would never be alone. And now I notice you. Every reader, every viewer. Perhaps you already see them. Perhaps they're in the corner of your eye, copying, learning, waiting. If you thought it was just a story, you are already part of it. If you'd leave now, what would you do? Open the horror box and subscribe. You never know who's watching next. I shut my laptop. The reflection in the black screen lingered too long. I didn't move. And then I saw the shadow in my chair, smiling just like me.